The best case scenario on your side of the house is that McDonald's writes lots of checks to fat people that you hope they'll spend on fitness trainers, when in fact they may just spend them on more donuts. They provide a mechanism for change. They indulge people who've been indulging themselves too much. First thing we'll look at is causation. Secondly, how best do we help the fatties? And finally, how do we get companies to change? Or whether they even do that. First of all, causation. Now, obviously the most important allegation made by the affirmative team is that there's something addictive about these products. And our rebuttal to that wasn't that it was just less addictive than cigarettes, it was that it's a different kind of addiction. Because you're not addicted to a particular chemical in the product. As the most recent speaker said, you're addicted to things like serotonin firing in your brain, which means you're addicted to the chemical that produces happiness, much in the same way that you could be shoe shopping or reading the newspaper or having sex. You can't sue Fairfax, your lovers, or a shoe shop because you're addicted to the experience of happiness. But also, like, that's kind of inherent to the idea of happiness. Like, it does make you feel good, it does provide you with satisfaction, but that in itself is not malicious to the person that's providing that happiness, because they did it with the best intentions. And then said, well, there's insufficient or misleading information provided. So we said that even outside the context of these companies, you get provided information in state schools where you're told that it's bad for you. The response we have at second is that, yes, you learn that in PE in year 9, and then you have a different mindset later on from when you buy food from McDonald's. A theory of knowledge that disputes the possibility of ever retaining information. It's like you were different in your psychological process years later, but you still knew the fact you learned then. And walking into McDonald's not erase the content of that knowledge, which we said also is communicated in things like, as Alex said, through the media. But also, like they said, well, the nutritional information in is just like too complex for people to understand. There's a column on it called that tells you what percentage of your recommended daily intake this burger is. Hint, if it's 50% and the chips are 40% and you're also eating something else that day, you've only got a narrow room to play with. And we think that's pretty clear and simplistic for most adults to understand, for most parents to read when they're buying food for their kids. They then said, well, yeah, but you didn't have the information that you guys alleged over the process of getting it back. And they gave the evidence for Super Size Me. Super Size Me is actually evidence for our side. After 30 days of eating that constantly, he still wasn't morbidly obese. He was just overweight. And these people aren't just overweight. They aren't just obese. They're morbidly obese. They are regular, serious practitioners of bad health over a long period of time. And the best piece of information these companies knew existed in the world was the scale these people could have just stood on to see just how much they weigh. And the opposition said, well, it's like responsible service of alcohol to drinking. But that begs the question in this debate, because first of all, we have to prove it's addictive. The reason we have responsible service of alcohol and responsible consumption of gambling is because some people don't have the free choice to make that decision. But also because it's impossible for someone at the counter at McDonald's to know whether you're the kind of person that's on their side of the house, like so addicted to your happiness that you have no self-control, and other people who deliberately, rationally seek to damage their health in the interest of delicious food. And we don't think there's any way that they can have a quick pop quiz to work out which one of those people that you are. They then said, well, there's this insidious effect where they have advertising at sporting games, which is another instance of dubious psychological characterization in the affirmative. Like, how stupid is that association? It's like, I saw a yellow M and some fit people. Maybe McDonald's will make me fit. We think that the fact that, once again, they have probably more addictive information from their own obesity, that they'll probably trust more than just that association they see on a television screen, doesn't add up to corporate responsibility in that case. And the final, most absurd one is that McDonald's is liable because their food is cheap, like they've been maliciously price competitive. We think that it's also quite cheap to just buy some vegetables and make them at home, and it's an option you did have but didn't take because you love the food and the product that they're selling you. We then said that we don't think that in this debate that people are being marketed to exploitatively. McDonald's, in every single statement, every time this is brought up, every time these lawsuits have been attempted, have said, we do not recommend eating this day in and day out. It's a part of a reasonable, balanced diet that also involves exercise. They've never lied in their ads, and they've certainly never even created the sense in which the people who consume this are healthy. And we didn't say that they only marketed to new audiences. What we said is that it's against the interests of McDonald's to have your product dependent on obese people, because that's terrible for your branding, because they are not attractive. And so when they're in your restaurants, they turn off other customers. Let's move on to these fat people. First of all, why is it important that we won that issue of causation? It's because the opposition can't do what they attempt to do towards the end of the debate and say, well, even if you cause it, like, we can just take money from them and get a good social outcome. I'm about to go into people that don't get that good social outcome, but it's not acceptable just to allow people to sue people who weren't at fault because ultimately that would make them happier in the long run, because that's not the purpose of a court system, that's the purpose of policy. And we think that even if that's true, they're not going to, as we move to the second issue, not going to have that mechanism of change for these people. Because a lot of this material, as both my first and second speaker pointed out, which is money is good for people, which is true, but not specifically good in the sense that you lose weight. But there's no reason to believe these people are going to spend it on getting a gym membership, as opposed to just eating more of these fatty foods. And we also think that in the context of running being free, in the context of healthcare being free in this country, these people don't need this money to change. But also, as Alex said, specifically now, the interaction with the legal system in the state will tell them how not responsible they are, how they don't get to be the agent of their own change, as opposed to recognising that is the best way to motivate someone to take responsibility. But also, Alex's point was not just about these fat people, it's about people not only obese or only overweight. What the message is saying to them now is that you should continue on that trajectory, just accepting in life that they're going to be obese, because it's ultimately not totally your responsibility. You're the victim of all of this influence from corporations and the world outside. We also think that their solution is very unlikely to happen, because so few lawsuits would succeed. It was a telling concession in Justin Speaks. He was like, well, the way we would know that you're able to sue this fast food company as opposed to that fast food company is you have to spend almost every day there. Like, very few people consume fast food in that fashion. So we think that so few of these lawsuits are going to be successful. But also, this is like actually now just encourages these smarter fat people amongst us. Just when you're already like a little bit obese, just go to one restaurant every day, become morbidly obese, and then sue. Because there's no way for the state to determine that you are maliciously eating too much McDonald's in order to seek money from the government. They say, well, it's about, it's like a tax, you deal with the externality. But dealing with the externality is taking money and giving it to people that are external to the transaction. Fat people are internal to the transaction, like they are the ones paying as a customer. So we don't think that's totally fair either. How do we change these companies? So one possibility is that there is it's still super profitable. We know this is probably true. It's still super profitable to sell delicious and unhealthy food to people. And so even the marginal legal costs they're going to have to deal with aren't going to change the overall behaviour, because it's now just only slightly less profitable. But if they do actually change and they reduce the fat content in this food, and by doing so reduce the deliciousness or reduce the availability of fat for food, or shut up shop altogether, we think that's terrible, because there are so many individuals in society that get lots of happiness from the occasional consumption of fatty foods, or even the regular consumption to the point of morbid obesity, that they're making a clear and logical trade-off between the happiness of being a glutton and the long-term health impacts that's going to have to you later on. And this material was valuable in this debate, because it showed that the legal system shouldn't, as we think they're ultimately going to do, in effect raise all the prices of this food, make it difficult for people consuming it healthfully to access it, but make it easier for fat people to access it once you give them this massive payout as a result of their own obesity. We think that it is not true that just because eating McDonald's is necessary to become obese, that McDonald's caused your obesity, so we're very, very proud to oppose.